Hey friends, we just got the third Commander Masters pre-constructed deck preview today. This is Enduring Enchantments. It's an Abzan Enchantress deck, so white, green, and black, and it has a powerful graveyard sub-theme. So in this video, I'm going to check out the full deck list, starting with the 10 brand new cards that are exclusive to this deck, and then I'm going to be checking out all of the reprints that you can find in the deck list as well. So I'll give you my first impressions on the new cards and on all the reprints and the deck as a whole, if I think the deck is good or not, and also if I think it's worth its asking price of $80. But before we begin, two quick reminders. First, if you want to pre-order this deck or any other Magic the Gathering products, you can head on over to our sponsor, cardkingdom.com/mtggoldfish. And number two, be sure to like and subscribe because tomorrow I'm going to be covering the final of the precons from Commander Masters as soon as it's revealed, and then after that I'm going to be doing full precon upgrade guides for all these new decks. So like and subscribe to never miss an upcoming video. Alright, we begin with the face commander of the deck. This is Enchantments, Hand of Erebos. It's a 5-mana Abzan 4/4 legendary enchantment creature demigod, and it has Menace. Other enchantment creatures you control have Menace, and whenever Enchantments enters the battlefield or attacks, exile up to one target non-aura enchantment card from your graveyard. Create a token that's a copy of that card, except it's a 3/3 black zombie creature in addition to its other types. So people have been wanting an Abzan Enchantress deck for a very long time. We have a lot of Selesnya options, we have Bant options for Enchantress, we have a lot of options for Enchantress. Even Orzhov, we have Daxos to return, for example. But a lot of people wanted to have Abzan Enchantress, and we also had Merkle, but that was like an Aristocrats kind of Enchantress deck. This one, however, takes Enchantress and focuses on a graveyard sub-theme and also focuses on some aggro. You're going to be reanimating your enchantments, but they're going to be coming back as creatures that can attack, and also your entire team has Menace. And Enchantments also wants to be aggressive. Her triggered ability does happen whenever she enters a battlefield, so it works with blink strategies, but also it's going to work as an attack trigger, so you need to have some evasion, you need to punch people in the face. So Enchantments is a very good value engine. Obviously, she wants to have enchantments in your graveyard, so ways to self-mill is going to be really nice to put enchantments in the graveyard, or any enchantments that sacrifice themselves or destroy themselves so you can get them back later with Enchantments will be really good too. Sagas, for example, or any sort of enchantment that can sacrifice itself pretty much. Now, the secondary commander for the deck is also a new card. It's Narcy, Fable Singer. This is a 4-mana Abzan 3/3 legendary creature human bard with lifelink, and whenever you sacrifice an enchantment, draw a card. Whenever the final chapter of a saga you control resolves, each opponent loses X life and you gain X life, where X is the saga's mana value. So Narcy works very well with sagas. She adds some life drain to all your sagas, and also your sagas sacrifice themselves after they resolve the final chapter, so you're going to draw a card off them as well. But Narcy also works with any sort of enchantment that sacrifices it as part of its value. For example, I don't know these cards off the top of my head in terms of their names, but I know there's a Selesnya enchantment that gives all your enchantments Shroud, and you can sacrifice it to tutor up an enchantment card. It's going to be popping up on the screen, so you'll see it. I just don't know it right now, but Editor Tomer does. And then there's a Seal Cycle, which is you can like crack it to have a cool effect. I think like Seal of Doom destroys a creature. So all these things can now draw a card with Narcy on the battlefield, but she's especially good with sagas because you get to get full value out of all of her abilities. So those are the two new commander options for the deck, and then we have 8 other brand new cards that are exclusive to this pre-constructed deck. The first one is a saga, Battle at the Hell Vault. It's a 6-mana white saga with 3 chapters. Chapters 1 and 2 say for each player, exile up to one target non-saga, non-land permanent that player controls until Battle of the Hell Vault leaves the battlefield. So this is kind of like a Grasp of Fate. It exiles your own stuff as well, but you can do that for 2 turns in a row. And then finally on the 3rd chapter, you create Avacyn, a legendary 8/8 white angel creature token with flying, vigilance, and indestructible. Very sweet. And obviously, after that 3rd chapter resolves, you sacrifice Battle of the Hell Vault, and then everything that was exiled with it returns back to the battlefield. So it doesn't remove anything forever, but it does remove them for 2 turns. And this can actually be a great way to enable blink strategies. If you have any enchantments that have strong enter the battlefield triggers, or if you have any constellation triggers, any cards that care when enchantments are entering the battlefield, this is a great way to get extra value out of your enchantments, while also temporarily removing some problematic permanents for 2 turns. And then you're left with an 8/8 flying vigilance indestructible beater, which is a huge threat. Like that's freaking awesome. This is a really cool card. Moving on, we have Boon of the Spirit Realm. This is kind of like a mass buff for all your creatures in an enchantment deck. It's a 5 mana for a white enchantment, Constellation. Whenever Boon of the Spirit Realm or another enchantment enters the battlefield under your control, put a blessing counter on Boon of the Spirit Realm. Creatures you control get +1/+1 for each blessing counter on Boon of the Spirit Realm. So when it enters the battlefield, now suddenly all your creatures get +1/+1, and then as you're casting more and more enchantments, as more of them are blinking into the battlefield and all that stuff, or our commander reanimates enchantments, all of these are going to put blessing counters, and suddenly your creatures are all going to have like +5/+5 or even higher in just a couple turns. So this adds a potent finisher to the deck. Next up, we have Cacophony Unleashed. This is a 7 mana black enchantment that says when it enters the battlefield, if you cast it, destroy all non-enchantment creatures. So asymmetrical board wipe, it's great here. And then whenever Cacophony Unleashed or another enchantment enters the battlefield under your control, until end of turn, it becomes a legendary 6/6 Nightmare God with Menace and Death Touch. It's still an enchantment. So this card, I think the main value here is just its cast trigger. If you cast it, you wipe the board of all opposing creatures, essentially. All your stuff are mostly enchantment creatures, so that's going to be just fantastic. That's almost worth the 7 mana all by itself. It's a little bit on the high side. But then whenever you're playing enchantments, and you're going to be doing that all the time, you have just a big 6/6 Menace Death Touch puncher in the facer. It's not a very good blocker unless you have ways of flashing in enchantments or blinking them at instant speed, but for the most part, it's just a bonus 6/6 beater on top of a really nice board wipe. So this card is great. Next, we have Composer of Spring. This is a 2 mana green 1/3 creature satyr bard with Constellation. Whenever an enchantment enters the battlefield under your control, you may put a land card from your hand onto the battlefield tapped. If you control 6 or more enchantments, instead you may put a creature or land card from your hand onto the battlefield tapped. So this card is just fantastic ramp in an Enchantress deck. Enchantress is all about drawing a ton of cards. There's so many Enchantress effects that just say whenever you play an enchantment, draw cards. So you're always going to have a full hand size if things are going correctly. So this is going to be just straight up ramp. And then once you have 6 or more enchantments on the battlefield and you're ready to go, you're just going to be straight up just putting creatures directly onto the battlefield. So this card is fantastic ramp at 2 mana for any Enchantress deck. Next up, we have Demon of Fate's Design. This is a top-end finisher type card for the deck. It's 6 mana black, 6/6 enchantment creature demon, flying and trample. Once during each of your turns, you may cast an enchantment spell by paying life equal to its mana value rather than paying its mana cost. So this is a top-end card, big beat stick that can ramp really, really well for you. And then it has an activated ability of 2 and a black, sacrifice another enchantment. Demon of Fate's Design gets +X/+O until end of turn, where X is the sacrifice enchantment's mana value. So the beat stick just gets bigger. It can finish games all by itself by sacrificing big enchantments that you don't need anymore. And also it puts enchantments in the graveyard that our commander can then reanimate. So it enables our commander, it enables our main graveyard sub-theme. So overall, a very good card, exactly what you want as a top end. It's both ramp and it also is a huge finisher, and it enables our graveyard theme. Then we've got a new impetus. This is Ghoulish Impetus. This is a 3 mana black enchantment aura, enchant creature. Enchanted creature gets +1/+1, has Death Touch, and is goaded. When enchanted creature dies, return Ghoulish Impetus to the battlefield at the beginning of the next end step. So I love the Impetus cycle. I think they're just very underrated in general. I run Shiny Impetus in a whole bunch of my red decks, but I think that Ghoulish Impetus is going to be the best of the best because it reanimates itself. So it gets rid of a potential attacker against you or a potential blocker, for example. It forces them to attack, so they might just trade with a potential blocker, anybody who isn't you really. And then when that creature dies, well, you get to have the impetus come back by itself and enchant something else and keep the value train going. And that's the real amazing part of this card is that it re-enchants another creature over and over again. The only way to get rid of it is to destroy it or bounce the creature or counter it, for example. So I just love this. It's a huge value engine. It's particularly great in an Enchantress deck, obviously, because it is an enchantment, and it will also continually trigger Constellation as it keeps re-entering the battlefield. So this card is absolutely fantastic, and I think it's also going to be severely underrated. Moving on, we have a nice finisher for the deck. This is Nyxborn Behemoth. It's a 12 mana green 10/10. However, it also costs X less to cast, where X is the total mana value of non-creature enchantments you control. So it can cost anywhere between 12 mana or just double green, 2 mana total. And it has Trample, and it has an activated ability of 1 and a green, sacrifice another enchantment, and it gains indestructible until end of turn. So this is exactly what you want for a top end finisher. It can cost up to just 2 mana, which is fantastic. It's an enchantment creature, so enchantment synergies, and also it functions very well for graveyard theme in our commander because you can sacrifice enchantments intentionally to reanimate them with our commander, and also it's just very hard to get rid of. It's a 10/10 trampler, it's a serious clock, and it can give itself indestructible. This card is just awesome. And then the final new card that is exclusive to the deck is Ondu Spirit Dancer. This is a 5 mana white 3/3 creature court cleric. Whenever an enchantment enters the battlefield under your control, you may create a token that's a copy of it. Do this only once each turn. So this is a great value engine for Enchantress. Making copies of the stuff you're going to be casting is always just double the value, double the fun. It is 5 mana. It's not an enchantment itself, so those are 2 big strikes against this card. But it's still going to be just sweet value whenever it can stick around, basically. And especially if you have any ways of getting enchantments to enter the battlefield on opposing turns as well at instant speed, like if you have any blink effects or just flash enchantments or any like graveyard reanimation at instant speed, that's going to be really, really good and make this card just fantastic. By itself, casting 1 enchantment per turn, it's fine, like if it can stick around and stuff, but it really has amazing potential if you can combine this with blink effects at instant speed. Alright, so those are the 10 new cards that are exclusive to the Precon, and then the rest of the cards in the deck are all reprints. So I'm going to go over the 4 most notable reprints first in terms of monetary value, and then we're going to just go over the rest of the cards from alphabetical order, and I'm going to give you just like my fast hot take on the cards, whether or not I think they're good in the deck or not. So the first 4 cards are the most expensive cards. The most expensive of the bunch is Dryad of the Lycian Grove. It's mana fixing, which is great in a 3-color deck. It allows you to play additional lands on each of your turns, so it's ramp, and it's an enchantment as well. So this is just great marks all around, a fantastic staple in Enchantress decks, and it's $15, so it's a nice pickup in the 99. And then we also have another staple, Starfield of Nyx, 5 mana enchantment. It's recursion for your Enchantress decks, and then it also doubles as a finisher because it turns all your enchantments that aren't creatures into creatures, and then you can start swinging for lethal. I actually don't like this card very much in Enchantress. I ended up just taking it out of all my Enchantress decks whenever I built it because I don't actually like turning all my enchantments into creatures for the most part, unless I have some creature synergies in my deck. Like if my commander, for example, gives all my creatures menace, that makes it a little bit better. Just because enchantments are relatively hard to remove, whereas creatures, every single color can remove it very, very easily. Creatures die much more reliably than enchantments do. So this is kind of a double-edged sword. Making all your enchantments creatures kind of opens the doors for a creature board wipe to just wreck you. So that's something to keep in mind. I think this card is still overrated, but in certain Enchantress shells, it can be very good. It's almost $15 as well. Grasp of Fate is fantastic for removal. It's $8. It scales up in multiplayer very, very well. I love to see it here. Citizen Champion is only $5, but it is a fantastic Enchantress that actually grows into a serious threat, and it's Constellation, so it's an ETB trigger, not a cast trigger. Not all the Enchantresses are ETB triggers, so this is notably very, very good in this deck. Now we'll move on to the reprint just in alphabetical order. Abundance, I don't really like it. Some people like it. Arresta of the Endless Web. It's an enchantment creature, which I do like. It makes a bunch of chump blockers. If you are against people who are Spellslinger especially, I don't really like this card as well. Arcane Signet, you know, it's a staple. Arcane of Sun's Grace, one of the best cards in Enchantresses in my opinion. It provides chump blockers early on, and then it provides a viable win condition also while gaining you life. I think this card is just fantastic. Great to see it here. And then we have Battle of Bredegard, which is a saga. It works well with both the Face Commander and the Lieutenant. Because you could reanimate it from the graveyard, you can draw cards when it's sacrificed, all that good stuff. Not particularly strong of a saga, but it is nice. Binding of the Old Gods, I run this even outside of Enchantresses, so I really like this a lot. Flexible removal plus ramp is always really nice. Calyx, Destiny's Hand, is a nice planeswalker for the Enchantress archetype. Cast Out is a fantastic removal spell with flash, which is very notable. It also cycles, so it can put itself in the graveyard to be reanimated with our commander. That's always really nice. Courser of Krufix, another great reprint here. It's $2, and it's just a staple in Enchantresses. It itself is an enchantment. It gains us some life as we're playing lanes, and we can play lands off the top of our library, so it can be card advantage. Culling Ritual, another fantastic reprint here. It's just a big swing effect. Like, it can get rid of all the treasures and clues or whatever small things are coming up the board, and then let you have an explosive turn. Destiny Spinner, another staple for Enchantresses, about $2 as well, making sure that your enchantments can't be countered, and also doubles as a finisher. Doomwake Giant, this is a classic, just all-star in Enchantress. Most Selesnya Enchantresses decks are just looking at this black card and just wishing for the day that they can run it, and now you finally can do it in Abzan here. Asymmetrical board wipe that's just repeatable over and over again, and it itself is an enchantment creature, which is just fantastic. Then we have Dreadhorde Invasion. I don't really like it that much, but I guess it makes repeatable 1/1 onto the battlefield. It grows slowly. That's fine, I guess. Eidolon of Blossoms, though, Premier Enchantress, one of the very best, is a Constellation trigger, so ETB effects are always going to work for it. It itself is an enchantment. You love to see it. It's one of the best. It's almost $3 by itself, too. Enchantress's Presence is an enchantment. It's not a creature, so it's harder for it to be removed, but you do have to cast enchantment. It's not an enter battlefield effect. Still, it's a staple. Erebos the Bleak-Hearted, it's fine. It is an enchantment. It's a creature. It's indestructible, all good things. And it also enables sacrifice synergies as well. You can sacrifice things intentionally to reanimate them later. You can draw some cards, all good things. Extinguish All Hope, another asymmetrical board wipe, a staple in Enchantress decks. It destroys all non-enchantment creatures, and most of our creatures are enchantments, so this is just fantastic. It's a staple. It's amazing. Felidar Retreat, another card that is really, really good. It's not that expensive because it's seen a lot of reprints, but it makes tokens, it grows your board. Those are all just great things to do, and it's an enchantment. Font of Fertility, it's thematic ramp. Greater Tanuki, don't like it this much, but I mean, it does put itself into the graveyard while ramping you, so that's pretty cool. It's an enchantment itself too. That's all right. Heliod, God of the Sun, the OG Heliod, gives all your creatures vigilance. As an enchantment creature, it's indestructible. And it can also, at instant speed for 4 mana, make a cleric enchantment creature token onto the battlefield to trigger Constellation at instant speed and whatnot. So this card is actually really solid in this deck. Then we have two very thematic, very powerful mana discount ramp cards in the deck. Herald of the Pantheon, enchantment spells cost 1 less to cast. Same thing with Jukai Naturalist, enchantment spells cost 1 less to cast. Both of them gain you life in 2 different ways. I think the Jukai Naturalist is just a little bit better because it itself is also a enchantment. Kalni Hard Expedition, another thematic ramp card. It's an enchantment. Kodama's Reach, it's not thematic or anything, but it is mana fixing, and this is a 3-color deck, so that's always welcome. And then we have a saga that actually has read ahead. It's the Love Song of Night and Day. I don't think this card is particularly that great, but we are more creature heavy than the average Enchantress deck, so it does get a little bit better here. It does sacrifice itself at the final chapter, so it does work very well with our 2 commanders. Mesa Enchantress, another Enchantress. You want to run all the Enchantresses, so I'm really glad to see that basically all the Enchantresses are actually in this deck. I think we're just missing like Argothian Enchantress. Mind Rack Harpy, this card is okay. I guess. No, it's not. It's fine. It's self-mill, so I guess it has some thematic synergies. Nessine Wanderer, I think this card is actually very good. Constellation, always finding the lands you want at any given time, making sure you never miss a land drop. Nyx Weaver, very good in this deck. It's an enchantment creature. It's self-mill, so it enables our graveyard synergies, and it can also be cracked to just regrow something, put it back into your hand. Omen of the Hunt and Omen of the Sun, both fine cards. Path to Exile, Premier removal. Rampant Growth, always solid. Sanctum Weaver, this is a huge one. It's $3.50, so it's a notable reprint, and it's also one of the best ramp cards in Enchantresses. It can be easily tapping for 3 or more mana, and it's also mana fixing for you, and it's also enchantment. So this card is fantastic. Sandworm Convergence, they print this card all the time. It's actually pretty good, but it's also 8 mana. So if you have any ways of consistently cheating this into play, then it gets really good. Otherwise, 8 mana for such a slow effect. I don't know. Kind of iffy on that one, but it's still cool to see it here. Then we have yet another Enchantress, as a Satyr Enchanter. Sigil of the Empty Throne, another staple for Enchantresses, one of the best finishers, one of the best cards in the archetype, I would say, because it just puts chump blockers that can immediately overwhelm the board very, very quickly. Sol Ring, you love to see it. Spirited Companion, fantastic here. Starfield Mystic, another thematic way to ramp out your enchantments. Love to see it. Sithis, probably the best enchantress out there. It's an enchantress that is itself an enchantment card, and also it gains you life. Then we have more sagas. The Binding of the Titans is a great way to exile graveyards, so it's graveyard hate, and it's a regrowth effect. I think this card is actually underrated. The Eldest Reborn is another great top-end saga. It's removal, but it's also reanimation. It's just really good value overall. Verduran Enchantress, it's also creeping up to the $3.5, almost $4 mark. It's another Enchantress. So we've basically seen, I think, all the Enchantresses except for like Argothian one. And then if you want to count like Femerith Enchantress or something like that. So I don't know. I think the card draw package here is actually really, really good. And then we have the lands, and this is the most disappointing part of all these precons in the Commander Master set, honestly. They really could have put more value into these, but this is just a 3-color deck at the very least. It's not like the 5-color slivers, so it is playable. Ash Barrens, don't really like it. Canopy Vista, I do like it. It's a Forest Plains as well. It generally enters the battlefield untapped. You can fetch duels. If you can fetch duels, then you can fetch this card pretty easily. Command Tower, it's a staple. Exotic Orchard, it's a staple. Fortified Village, don't really like. Golgari Rot Farm is okay. Crozen Verge, I think, is very good because it can get duels. Necro Blossom Snarl and the Shine Shadow Snarl, not good in 3-color decks. Sungrass Prairie, meh. Temple of Malady, meh. The other 2 temples are also meh. Sansep Citadel, taps for 3 colors though, so I think I give it a pass for being a tap land. Another bounce land with Selesnya Sanctuary, another bounce land with Orzhov Basilica. The Tainted Field and Tainted Wood, I think, are pretty decent in 2-color decks, but not in a deck that, like this one, that only has 5 swamps. Like, yeah, it has a couple ways of tutoring up swamps, but there's only 5 swamps. These cards are not very good in this deck at all. So those are all the lands. My initial thoughts of this deck is actually really, really well constructed, and it looks like a powerful deck. It has all the Enchantress pieces that you would want to see in an Enchantress deck, and ignoring the lands, which are by far the worst part, it could actually look like just a deck that some person brought to their casual table, built it from scratch. Like, it hits all the right marks. However, I must point out that the asking price of this deck is $80, and that just seems way too high for the reprint equity that we're getting here. Like, the lands are just bad. They could have put bond lands, they could have put check lands in this deck very easily. There's no reason not to. And a lot of the lands they did put in are very disappointing. But that said, I think this deck is really, really sweet. I can't wait to get my hands on it. I just wish that the lands were better and the price was lower. So that's it for the Abzan Enchantress deck. Let me know your thoughts on the deck in the comment section below, and be sure to come back tomorrow as we cover the final precon. So until then, friends, see ya!